it's Julie. You know, my hope was that when I did these recordings, I would have my makeup on and have my hair done so that I looked like I had it all together, but at the same time, I realized that being real is probably the whole point of even posting these videos. So, it was brought to my attention that a lot of people, if not most of the people who will stumble across this, don't know me and don't know how I got to the whole stage of being an amputee. So, I'm going to try and summarize real quick kind of how we got here. I was in a car accident in January 2010, and that car accident was a freak accident, single vehicle, and my at the time friend and I were out test driving his car, getting it ready for street legals. We were, thank goodness, protected by a roll cage because we went off the road. And we didn't just go off the road into a ditch like normal people. We went off the road into a ditch and hit a driveway, which meant that the car did some cartwheels and some rolls, and my side of the car was obliterated. And I took most of the impact, obviously, as a passenger. That tends to happen. And my front wheel was pushed back, and it was hit so hard that the wheel itself, the aftermarket wheel, exploded, and there were pieces of it everywhere. And my phone went missing. I had just been on the phone with a friend who said that she had picked up some MAC makeup for me, and I could barely hear her because the car was so loud. My phone was never recovered. And unfortunately, Stephen hit his head really hard, and he forgot where we were. He didn't forget who I was, thankfully, but he did not know where we were, and he started to panic. So basically, he was sitting in the passenger seat unconscious. I woke him up. He looked around. He didn't know where we were. He got out. He did the whole, oh my God, look at you, you're hurt, you know, you're gonna hate me, and all this other stuff, and oh my God, my car, all these hours of work, and all these dollars. And then, you know, back to me, oh my God, you're hurt, oh, you're hurt. And that went on for a little while until he decided that calling 911 was a good idea. Called 911 17 times. And the reason for that being, he had no idea where we were. And they weren't able to check the phone signal because we were right beside the border. And I guess the signal was too weak there or whatever. So we were actually sitting there for quite a while before he called his buddy whose house we had just left before the accident. And he was able to find us and then call 911, and they were able to come get us. So in that time, I realized that my foot was definitely in rough shape, being that I was able to prop it up to try and make it look normal. It was kind of in a angle. I know. Sorry if you guys are squeamish, but it's the truth. So I kind of propped it up against some of the wreckage so it looked like it was, you know, foot shaped and it's pointing upwards. And my arm, I knew, was broken right away because there was some bone out. Shock is beautiful though, so I didn't feel anything until our friend showed up and said, hey, are you able to like get out? And I shifted my weight just the littlest bit, and I got the biggest Charlie horse of my life in my butt cheek because my hip was dislocated. So tally of injuries, my foot was partially amputated, which means all of the bones were disconnected, but my Achilles tendon and some skin were still holding it together. My right arm here was broken and had to be reconstructed. My left hip was dislocated, and my pelvis was broken in 2 spots, kind of like a V shape on the back of my pelvis. So they got me to the Langley emergency room, and Langley is not a trauma hospital, so essentially they stabilized me because I was bleeding to death. A whole lot of drama happened in the emergency room, but that is not a YouTube sort of story. And then they shipped me finally after a couple of hours to Royal Columbian. And at Royal Columbian, they began to do MRIs and CT scans and all this other stuff. They took out all my facial piercings, because at the time I had 1, 2, 3, my tongue was pierced, and a belly button ring. And so they had to take out all my piercings, and while I was waiting for an OR, the pain started coming back. I guess the medication they gave me had worn off, and I was threatening to get up and walk out. So fast forward about 14 hours, because it was about 13 and a half hours of surgery-ish, something like that. And when they started to wake me up, I'm assuming it was probably the next day, to be real with you, because obviously my concept of time when I'm high as heck is not very good. They woke me up and they said, we've done everything that we can for your foot. It may or may not take, the blood supply may just be permanently damaged and it may never come back. Or you may be able to kind of restore the blood supply and then keep it for an undetermined amount of time. So amputation was always on the docket for me, as far as I understood. I was determined, obviously, to heal and make the most of things. And when I ended up getting pregnant with Aislinn, the increase in blood supply that you get is about 25%, from what I understand. Your blood volume increases. And when that happened, it actually pushed the blood supply down into my foot. And we did manage to save it. And we managed to save it for 7 years. And 2 of those years, at least, I was definitely done my relationship with my foot, who I, by that time, had named Dolores. The pain was ridiculous. I've had a hip replacement about 4 years ago now. And that hip replacement was due to necrosis. So the head of my femur died, like the round part at the top where your hip fits into the pelvis. That part had died. So what they did was they cut the top off of that, sorry again if you're squeamish, and put in a new metal piece and a little plastic